everyone, and welcome to my channel. My name is Barbara. This is Barbara Talks Some More. Check out my original channel called Barbara Talks. Over there I have a bunch of videos. They are all basically organized into playlists, so anything to do with the astrology world, the metaphysical world, aspects, synastry, all the things, okay, you will be able to find over there. And again, it is divided into playlists, so if there's something you're looking for in particular, you guys can find the playlist and then find the video that you are looking for there, okay? Over here, I am going over public figure natal chart readings, okay? When I originally started this channel, I maybe thought I was going to talk about some other things, but most things I pretty much cover over on my original channel, but you never know where the wind will blow. So for now, it is for public figure natal chart readings, okay, and synastry readings, of course, okay? That's what I go over here, so be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Over here, I don't post as often because usually I have to hook into the person's energy or like the two individuals' energies, right? By maybe hearing about them or just like hooking into the energy, or sometimes someone tells me about them or a movie comes out and then I get curious, sometimes then I start to read about them, learn about them, right? And then I start to hook into their energy. So sometimes it happens that way. Otherwise, I kind of have to do some research, okay, on the person if I haven't really connected to their energy before or heard about them before, or maybe again, I know who they vaguely are, but maybe I don't know their backstory, for example. So always feel free to let me know who you guys would like me to read next in the description box below, okay? But again, it is going to be random, whoever comes through and whoever energy I hook into. Now, today we're going to be going over Prince's natal chart, okay? So one of you guys actually did request Prince. It's interesting, okay? There is definitely some sort of connection between Prince and Michael Jackson. Always in the music industry, they always want to make like rivals and so on and so forth, and like rivalry and like all these things. But, both of these individuals were very popular for the time that, they were existing in, okay? I remember, some people tell me they would kind of ask each other questions like, are you Prince? Are you Michael Jackson? And, I feel like this whole group of individuals, especially the Pluto and Leo generation, really thrived during the entertainment industry era, okay? It was really much like a booming, post-World War time, for creativity and creatives and like all these things. So it's so interesting to see that they literally incarnated into that period of time so they could express their creativity. Now, that being said, okay, everything that comes through in these readings is alleged, okay, based on my own opinions, interpretations of the natal charts, okay? And, I always tell you guys as well, a few disclaimers. First of all, I'm not a psychologist. These are just things that are based on my own observations. And of course, if you guys have these energies taking place in your own natal chart, or like, in the synastry readings, if you guys have aspects with other people, it doesn't always mean it's going to play out that way. You always have to look at the whole natal chart as a whole to see, what's going on with the story here. One time I saw a post, and I wish I had saved it, or maybe I did. It's been probably lost somewhere, okay, in the past now at this point in time. But how rare a natal chart really is in terms of all the configurations, right? And all of these things. So not everybody's energy is always going to play out the same way if you have that particular energy taking place in your own natal chart. I mean, I'm sure if we were to put this question into Google or whatever, it would tell us how rare, a birth chart is. Anyways, so also the other thing that I also want to mention is if you guys would like your own natal chart reading, synastry reading, progressed natal chart reading, you guys can all find those on my website in the description box below. I also have mini natal chart readings and mini synastry readings available as well. So when you go on my website, you go underneath the readings tab, you guys select which reading you guys would like, okay? And then you guys send me an email and we will go from there, okay? So today we're going to be going over Prince, okay, and Prince's natal chart. What's really, really interesting? I was just checking. He crossed out in 2016, and it's so wild. I actually do have a story about around the time when he crossed out. A few months prior to him crossing out, me and one of my friends, we were at the club, and they kept saying that Prince was going to come. Now, in retrospect, who knows if they were telling the truth or they were lying. Maybe they were just saying that because they wanted people to stay. But basically, me and my friend, we stayed, we waited and waited, and after a while, we were like, what, forget this. Like, it's just like taking too long, right? So we just left. And it was so funny because a few months later, he crossed out. I mean, that part's not funny, but the funny part was my friend's dad was like, if you guys had just stayed a little longer, maybe you guys would have seen Prince live, so I always remember that. That always connects me to Prince's energy. But anyways, let's go ahead and jump into his natal chart reading here. So I have him here as June 7th, 1958, okay, born at 6:17 p.m. Okay, he's born in Minneapolis in the United States, okay. When I look at his natal chart, he's got his sun in Gemini, A house, moon is in Pisces, 4th house, and then his ascendant is in Scorpio. Makes sense why I'm picking up on his energy. Today when I'm recording this, it is June 4th, okay? He was born on June 7th, and a lot of the time, a lot of these people, I start hooking into their energy around their birthday or their death day, or if some information is about to come through, okay, about these individuals. So probably because his birthday is so soon, maybe people who are still living, right? Because he is from within our time frame, right? I'm sure he's got family and so on and so forth who are still living and maybe thinking of him, and you know, his birthday's coming up and so on and so forth. So they're probably pulling his energy, okay, closer to the realm. And of course, you know, the Michael Jackson movie came out recently, kind of like I was saying at the beginning of this video, okay, there is definitely a connection between Prince and Michael Jackson. They always try to make like rival vibes. They do that with all of the people in the industry, right? Especially like these days with like rappers, they always try to make like beef between people unnecessary, but it's always like PR things, right? So it's interesting because when I hook into the energy, I actually don't think there was any animosity between Prince and Michael Jackson. But here is what's interesting, okay? All these people who get into these industries are always super, super advanced, first of all, spiritually. And, you know, a lot of the time they are either involved in the occult from a young age, or they have the interest in the occult to get to where it is that they're trying to go. And look at this, Prince, okay, again, you know, we're basing this off of the fact that, you know, let's say everything is accurate here, okay? Because again, you know, we got to take these things with a grain of salt, but I found 2 websites with the same information, so we're going to base everything off of that. So look at this. Prince is a moon in Pisces in the 4th house, just like Michael Jackson, okay? So Michael Jackson was also moon in Pisces. I'd have to double check and see what Michael Jackson's moon house was. Both of them moon in Pisces. They say, okay, they say that this is the most quote-unquote evolved moon. Anytime you have Pisces energy or even 12th house energy, right? You know, with these energies, it's like you would have had to have gone through all of the preceding signs, right, to finally get to Pisces in this case. So having the moon in Pisces, super evolved, but it's also mutable, which is interesting, right? So, you know, moon in Pisces, are going to be highly sensitive, highly empathetic. Again, you know, inclination toward music, always with Pisces, 12th house types of energies, Neptunian types of energies, like you're always going to be drawn to these things, right, as an outlet, especially in this case, for, you know, your emotions. So we now see 2 musicians who have had the moon in Pisces. And you know, I kept hearing the song Purple Rain, okay, for like the past 2 days. I've just been hooking into that song and I just keep like laughing to myself because I'm not sure if any of you guys watched the Michael Jackson movie, but basically like there was this clip in the Michael Jackson movie and he's actually said this in the past too, okay? I actually heard this before the movie even, that he had said this, basically like that he, you know, in the movie that he was kind of saying that he's channeling, he wanted to get like the music, the insight before Prince did, right? And then the joke that I saw online was people being like, the one time Michael slept, you know, Prince, you know, came up with the song Purple Rain. I don't know, I just find that so funny. But anyways, the other interesting thing about Prince is, and what I hook into more within his energy field, yes, he had the whole music aspect of things going on, but like Prince, I'm not sure if he was known for this. For whatever reason, I know this about him, okay, or I hook into this energy about him, so I'm not sure if this was like public information or something that people will kind of like say behind the scenes about him, but he was known for his like orgies, okay, or his like almost like harem, I guess, of women, or just like his poly vibes and like these types of things. And like in his case, what I find really interesting is like even when I hook into his energy, he really gives me bisexual energy. Now, I'm not sure if he ever came out with this, okay? I'm not sure if this is something that, you know, was public, right? Because again, for these people, I don't know every detail of their life. So maybe this is something that was public information. Let's find out. Actually, now I'm curious. Okay, so I just Googled it and basically here it says that he never publicly identified as bisexual, but honestly, I definitely get bisexual vibes from him. And it's like, I do feel like, you know, these orgies or whatever he was involved with like multiple women, okay, could have been maybe also with men in there somewhere too, okay? All these people do these things, okay? You know, this is part of like the occult stuff, and I do feel like he already came in with this knowingness. He's a Scorpio rising, sun in the 8th house, okay? He probably already had this knowingness of like harnessing sexual energy. If it was mainly predominantly with women, he was probably harnessing their sexual energy to elevate himself, okay? So that's something that happens with like men who have Scorpio in their charts. Obviously not all of them, okay? Again, you know, I always have to say that it's not going to be all of them, but some of them have this like innate awareness, okay, of how to harness in general sexual energy. But again, really because it is a feminine energy that is the portal, right, for creativity with men a lot of the time. And this is why a lot of the time, you know, when you see all these successful men and so on and so forth, it's like you might see them with multiple women, or like they might think that that's like the pinnacle of success or whatever. It's because they're harnessing all of the women's sexual energy, okay? Now, you know, we can get into a conversation about that, but, you know, that's probably going to have to be a different conversation for a different day, right? Because it's like if women were in their power and they were aware of this, they will kind of keep the energy more for themselves to elevate themselves versus giving it to these people who basically harness their sexual energy, right? The women's sexual energy to elevate themselves, okay? So this is something that Prince definitely did or was like aware of, whether it was conscious or unconscious. That's probably why he had like this poly house. I keep seeing this poly house. Let me see if this was an actual thing. Let me Google this. Okay, so I Googled this to see if they were all living in the same house together. I keep seeing a house with like all these women, like them all living in a house together and basically in like orgies and so on and so forth. But it doesn't really say that he lived with them. It just says that he had arrangements throughout his life, okay, where he lived with all of these individuals. Now, you know, the article that did pop up here was Prince was hooked on sex parties before death. Okay, this is really interesting because, again, see, that's the energy that I pick up on related to him, okay? But again, that's pretty much anybody in the industry, right? They are all merging the sexual energy with each other, you know, engaging in sex sex magic, sexual magic, you know, elevating themselves, and of course siphoning, you know, usually the men, okay, siphoning from the women, okay, and then, you know, amongst the men when they do it with each other in these industries, it's like a dominance thing to like show who's boss and so on and so forth, okay? Maybe some of you guys know, maybe some of you guys don't know, maybe some of you guys intuitively know, okay? But here's where it gets interesting. He has Mars trine Uranus, okay? He has Venus square Uranus, and then he has Mars trine Uranus. Usually, I know a lot of the time people are going to say people within the LGBTQ community, you know, are going to have Venus Uranus aspects. For example, you know, this is unconventional relationships, but to me, it's usually Mars. So it's going to tell you more so about unconventional sexuality, okay? And unconventional quote unquote sexual tastes and so on and so forth. So he does have Mars trine Uranus. And by the way, guys, I look up to 10 degrees of an orb, okay? Sometimes if it catches my eye, I will open up to 15. I know some people are very strict with the orbs, but usually what I'm doing when I'm doing these readings is I'm hooking into the energy first. I'm doing the reading, so it's like I'm actually looking for that in the chart itself. So that's kind of how I do my natal chart readings. Now, of course, you know, during that period of time, you know, androgyny was a thing. Like they were slowly starting to introduce that. And in general, like a lot of these artists like would dress in this way just to catch the attention, you know, like that's just like what was popular during that time, especially in these like music scenes, right? Like a lot of these artists that lived during that period of time would dress a certain way, right? That was just kind of like their way of standing out. So like that's absolutely there. And of course, right, Venus square Uranus, Venus Uranus aspects are always going to have a unique sense of style, something different, something ahead of the time, and sometimes challenging, you know, the status quo and the norms and so on and so forth. Now, I'm curious to know if Prince had any partners. This is really interesting, okay? So I just looked up, did Prince have any partners, okay? Because I don't hook into any like romantic connections with him. His energy is very like androgynous. A lot of the time when people have Venus Uranus aspects, okay, or any sort of Uranus or the personal placements, it makes them like this like awkward energy. Like I can literally sense it within the person. It just like makes the person feel either uncomfortable in their skin. You know, Venus square Uranus can sometimes make the person actually like awkward in general, like socially awkward, or you know, sometimes awkward with women, okay, or just like feel uncomfortable in their skin. And that's kind of like the vibe that I get with Prince too, okay? So it's interesting that it's in his chart. But anyways, what I looked up here, I basically was like, did Prince have any partners? And then here it says that he had one wife here and they had a boy, okay, they had a son who tragically died a week after birth, okay, and then it says it contributed to the end of their marriage. This is interesting to me. Again, you know, it's alleged, but this is very much giving me, you know, sacrifice vibes, you know, sacrificing the first son. You know, that's like a thing in a lot of these communities. Obviously, I can't confirm that, but, you know, that's kind of what I thought of initially when I saw that, okay? And then after that, you know, I also looked up to see if he had any kids in general, and it says that he did not have any surviving children. So that's interesting that he didn't have any kids, because even when I hook into his energy, it's very, like, solo, independent, kind of, like, floating energetically, okay? And by the way, like, when I'm doing these readings, this isn't, like, messages from beyond, okay? I'm not, like, you know, channeling him and getting him to say these things, or, like, information from him directly. Looking at the energy around the situation, also by hooking into the natal chart itself. So that's really, really interesting. So he is a sun in Gemini, like I mentioned, 8th house. Interesting. Mercury in Gemini, 7th house. Venus is in Taurus, and it's in the 6th house. The Taurus does deal with the vocal cords, okay, and singing. So him having Venus in Taurus, literally money through the vocal cords, money through the voice, okay. It is in the 6th house. I do feel like he was very like critical around his work, okay. There's definitely that energy, and I do feel like it's interesting. I feel 12th house energy from him, and it's interesting because it's like he gives me 12th house vibes. He does have Neptune in the 12th house, okay? His North Node is in the 12th house too, but there's this energy with him when I hook into his energy where he might either feel like forgotten, or he might feel like he wasn't as seen, for example. Like even though he was in the spotlight, he just like has this energy connected to him. It could be the sun in the 8th house. Maybe he just carried this energy internally throughout his life in general, right? Where he didn't feel as seen, right? As for example, maybe other singers too, okay? Now, the other thing that I found interesting with him too was he was one of the first ones that started like quote unquote exposing the music industry, right? And it's interesting that he like quote unquote died from an overdose, because there's always like the rumors, again, allegedly, that like people who start to get too vocal or like again start to go against the script, of course, you know, the contracts they sign, all these things, right? That, you know, that might be one of their, you know, ways or modalities of crossing out, of course, allegedly. Okay, that's just like what people say through the grapevine. Now with Prince, it's really interesting because it's like, I'm not sure if you guys know about him, like how he changed his name to that symbol people weren't able to pronounce. And apparently the symbol, I'm looking at this online too, the symbol basically meant it was like a symbol for male and female like together, which I found really, really interesting because he just like has this androgynous vibe to him, very Uranus, very much someone coming from the future back, okay? And a lot of the time, a lot of these singers, what takes place with them is like they put codes into their music, and because they're so ahead of their time, it's kind of like there for like whoever is going to hook into like that consciousness, like their fans and so on and so forth, right? It's just like a frequency thing, like they're emitting a certain type of frequency, which is interesting. His North Node being in the 12th house, the 12th house does deal with like music in general. So basically his North Node being in Libra and in the 12th house, okay, there's the energy of just like bringing people together through music. It is at 29 degrees, right? I do feel like he incarnated into this lifetime after a period of time, because his energy is very foreign to this Earth's atmosphere. Like think about like how advanced he would have been for the period of time. Like 1993 is when he changed his name. That's what I wanted to say about that too. So apparently, and again, this is through the grapevine, so like allegedly, but apparently he changed his name to the symbol because he wanted to get out of his like contracts with like the record labels and so on and so forth. And like he was one of the first ones that started like speaking out against like the industry and like all these things. So it's interesting because it's like, again, there's this core soul group, okay? So, you know, MJ's part of it, Prince, you know, Princess Diana, you know, they all kind of incarnated around the same time to like start poking holes, okay, in like the matrix, essentially. So it's interesting because like, as I hook into his energy, I'm curious to know like, what was his upbringing like? What was his family like? Because he is very like energetically detached like from everybody. Like he's very much like this like solo individual. Like the vibe he gives me is almost like he like incarnated like literally on his own. I mean, obviously everyone has a family or like they're born from, you know, parents, right? But it's just like with his energy is very like detached from family. It's very detached from everybody. It's very solo. It's very independent. But it's interesting because at the same time, energetically, when I hook into him, he didn't feel alone. It's not like he struggled with loneliness. It's just like there's like this acceptance around it. Like when I hook into his energy, there's an energy of just like floating almost, you know, is really what it is. It's just like him just like on his own. And it's so interesting. It's just like someone who was just really, really ahead of the time. One thing that I did hook into, okay, was he does have a lot of karma, quote unquote, with the father. So I'm curious to know what their relationship was like. So basically that's what I'm getting here, okay? There's like this like disconnect or just like not being connected to really either of the family members. Like very much feeling alone, doing his own thing. So it's really interesting when I hook into his energy. The IC for him is an Aquarius. That would make sense to why he is like so detached from the home, from the family. Even in general, he could have felt that from the family toward him. There's really this energy of just like literally he's part of this world, but not of it. Like really from outside of this realm. Okay, that's kind of what I'm getting for his energy overall, but like very elusive or like evasive energetically too. Okay, here it is. He's got Chiron in Aquarius and it is conjuncting the moon. So huge wound around the home. I do feel like that's probably why he like separated from the home so much. Okay, there's probably some kind of wound there. Maybe not liking, you know, how he was raised, because moon is in Pisces. Moon and Pisces people really idealize. They always want to have like an ideal type of home, unconditionally loving. Maybe he did not receive that and he was just kind of like, okay, forget this, I'm gonna go off and do my own thing. You know, the Chiron is aspecting a lot of things in his chart. It's squaring his ascendant, squaring his descent, opposing his midheaven, conjuncting his IC, trining his north node, trining the sun, conjuncting the moon like I mentioned, trine Jupiter, sextile Saturn. Pretty much the whole chart here is aspected by this Chiron, which kind of tells me it's like this wound around Chiron in Aquarius, okay, feeling different, feeling, you know, like you just like don't belong is actually what pushed him out there, and he kind of monetized it is really what it is. It's interesting to me because it's like it's more so psychically what I'm hooking into here, because it's opposing the midheaven. It's almost like intuitively he knew if he put it out there he would like heal internally is really what it is. And for him, I feel like the wound originated because it is in the third house here in school. Again, not feeling accepted, you know, being different, you know, kind of being ostracized from the group, just like always being different. But a lot of the time it's like that quote people say, you know, if you don't fit in, you know, you were born to stand out, or if you feel like you don't fit in, like, again, I'm paraphrasing here, but that's like the gist of it. Chiron retrograde, so he's coming back with this wound again. Jupiter retrograde, Saturn retrograde, Neptune retrograde. It's interesting. His energy is like energetically blocked, okay? There's like more things here going on here that are cloaked, if that makes sense, energetically when I hook into his energy, that are just like off bounds. He was very into, I think, magic, and I think he knew how to cloak his energy, and I think that that's also why he changed his name. Other than like the whole record label thing, I think that there's an energy here of just like separating from the public. Like it's so interesting because the sun is in the 8th house. It's like even though he was a public figure, he still was able to maintain a certain level of privacy, which that 8th house was looking for. It's really interesting. And now too that he crossed out, okay, it's just like there is this like energetic barrier, okay? The energy's cloaked. So there's more going on here that basically he kind of energetically close that other people can't hook into. This is really fascinating. This is someone who's really advanced, okay, when it came to the occult things, and I think he incarnated with this knowingness, okay, and I think that that's why he engaged in a lot of these like occult activities, you know, the sex magic and like all these things. Changing the name, you know, the symbol that he chose, it's so advanced. It's very much from like a different realm. This is such an interesting energy. It's such a unique energy, and it's almost like this need for privacy, or like this cloaked energy that he kind of created for himself. It's like it kind of prevented him from being full blown, like known. Like there's something with his energy where he always kind of faded to the background. Okay, he found a way to maneuver, okay, you know, the public life, but like, you know, with the exposing, but like still being hidden. And it's also connected to like psychic attacks and like all these things. This is a very advanced soul, is really what it is. And I do feel like he's someone who came from the future back. And it's interesting because it's like there's more connected to him to like occult practices than the actual music itself. Is really interesting. I did not think the reading was going to go in this direction. Okay, so there's an energy here of like, for people who are interested in him or like align with his like, again, energy or like his vision, it's like if they were to dabble into learning more about him, they would learn more about his like occult side versus the actual music side. Like the music was kind of like the outlet for him to be pushed out there, because that's what was popular during that period of time. Pluto and Leo, okay, that generation, and he has Pluto in the 10th house. I think there's another reason. He's got a lot of private energies taking place here. This is a really fascinating energy that I'm hooking into, okay? But people who are aligned with him, okay, or who resonate with him, this subset of the collective, it's like, again, you know, people who research about him, learn more about him, they would learn more about his occult side. And that's, I think, what he was trying to plant more seeds of versus the music. The music was just something that pushed him to the public arena because that's what was popular during that period of time. One more thing that I also want to mention before I wrap up this reading with Prince was his day number was 7, which is also another Aquarius type of energy. So it's so interesting to see how this is literally coded, not only in the astrological aspect of things, but also in the numerological aspect of things. Now in numerology, you know, I'm personally very, very surface level when it comes to numerology. I just feel into the energy, and people in the numerology world aren't going to necessarily say that 7 is Aquarius, right? But that's how it feels to me. Okay, it's an energy that's ahead of the time, innovative, sometimes like alone. Okay, it's very much an alone energy, like independent. Okay, it deals with spirituality, spiritual awakenings, the 7th chakra, of course, right? It also deals with intellect, intelligence, being ahead of the time, again, feeling like you're part of this world but not of it. So I found that that was really interesting too, because it's literally coded in his whole energetic field. Really interesting. Was not expecting the reading to go into this direction. Okay, but I'm gonna leave it here. Okay, that's kind of what I have for you guys for Prince at this point in time. Maybe at a different point in time it'll come up to look at his energy again. I hope you guys enjoyed this reading. Of course, he is a Gemini. Happy Gemini season to all those celebrating. Once again, if any of you guys want any readings, check out my website. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe, and I hope you all have a beautiful rest of the day.